Today is July 6th, 1999. My name is B. Schachter. The videographer today is Barry Stallman. We are here to interview Malca Schreiner, who's a survivor of the Holocaust. We are making this video under the auspices of the Montreal Holocaust Memorial Center. The purpose of this interview is to add to the oral history of the Holocaust. What is your name, please?
My name is Malca Schreiner.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Poland. Klecz was the name of the town. And I was born in November 1920.
Okay, and where did you grow up?
I started in Klecz, and I was there until the age of 12 in my hometown, where I went to primary school, Hebrew school, which was called Tarbut.
Okay, and what languages did you speak and with whom?
I spoke Yiddish, Russian, and Hebrew. Hebrew was spoken at school and sometimes outside with my friends. At home, I spoke with my parents Yiddish and Russian.
Okay. How religious was your family background?
My parents were traditional Jews, not very religious. My father would go to synagogue on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. I remember them taking me to synagogue as a child.
This was in
But
class.
on the holidays, yeah. Normally, not much, not very religious.
Okay.
But a traditional home.
Your schooling, if we could just go back to that for a minute. You had said you went to a Tarbut school,
Yes.
and you went there for how many years?
I finished at elementary school.
And from there?
From there, when I had to go to high school, there were no high schools in my hometown. So I was sent to a city, which, it's not a city, it's a town called Nieswisch, which was 17 kilometers away. And you had to travel by horse and carriage. There was one bus which would leave once a day if you were lucky to get on that bus. Otherwise, you had to go by horse and carriage. In the winter, with a Schlitten, means sleigh, yes. It took a long time to get to school, and I was there going to gymnasium, so called. It was high school.
And you were there 1932?
Until 1937. And in 37, I wanted to pursue my education. Gymnasium was finished, so I went to Grodno, which was, for me, very far away. I had to change buses.
This
And
was even further than...
much further, yes. And it was a bigger town already. And it was already a Polish school. I had to make my exam to enter this school. I went to Liceum Pedagogiczne, which is like a CJEP, I would say. And pedagogiczne means that I wanted to become a teacher.
Okay, so you had quite a number of years of education,
Yes,
which was
I
very
had
unusual.
a very good
for a
education,
girl
very
at that
unusual,
time.
yeah. Yes.
Okay. What about your
I want to
family?
mention also, that's interesting, that I was one of the few Jewish girls that made this exam and entered that school, and I was accepted, and I did very well.
Did any of the girls in the school resent your presence there?
Yes, absolutely. I felt it. There were two Jewish girls in our school, a friend of mine, I even remember her name. She was living with her parents in Grodno, but I was an outsider. I came and I had to have a room with somebody with a family, and my parents paid for it, of course. And it was hard for me also to be in that school, very difficult, but I made it.
Were you able to see your parents the time that you were there?
In the summer, I used to come home for the summer vacation for 2 months.
And you were there over the start of the war?
When the war started, it was September, and I was back home for the summer. I didn't manage to go back yet when the war started. It was 39.
Okay. Your family, did you have sisters, brothers?
I had 2 brothers. One was a year and a half younger, the other one was 5 years younger than me, born in 25.
And their names were?
The older one was Zev. They called him Velvo at home. And the younger one was Nachman.
Okay, and what did your parents do in Kletsk?
My father had a store and a shop. It was a jewelry store and a shop to repair watches and jewelry. He was also the optometrist of the town. If somebody needed glasses, he would come to my father, and he would have I don't know what it's called, speedometer for an optometrist, that you get how strong a prescription you need, and he would know exactly what glasses to prescribe for people. He was also selling silver flatware. So when somebody would get married in this little town, would come and buy a gift.
Like a trousseau?
A trousseau I had to buy at my father. So I had to buy a watch for the groom with a chain.
A pocket watch?
A pocket watch. The rings for the wedding band and all things. He would make it by himself. And also this trousseau, like you said before, they had 4 companies that would make it. It was Norblin, Frage, Henneberg, and the 4th one I don't remember. And they would choose one pattern and buy for 6 or for 12. This was also, let's say, a silver sugar dish, or for butter. Any gift that was needed was bought for my father. And this was the only store in town for this type of merchandise.
And your mother, did she help
My
out in
mother, yes, she would, when the children grew up a bit, and she would help in the store to sell rings, occasionally watches, and she would also give ideas to the bride, the parents of the bride or the groom, ideas what to buy. She would suggest. So she was pretty good for it. Spoke a very poor Polish, because this was actually Poland, but she spoke Russian, and she was trying to speak Polish, but the Polish was very awkward. When we grew up and we knew already Polish, we would sometimes make fun of mother with her Polish, but she managed to sell.
Okay, so they had a good livelihood from the store?
No, not really, because my father would buy all his goods from salespeople from Warsaw, which would come to the small town to sell it to him. He would always give, it was called Wechsel, I don't know, is it a check?
Exchange?
Yes, a Wechsel, not money, never had money to pay. And then he would have to pay it. And
he bought it on consignment?
No, it was a paper that you fill out. It's like a check that you give, but he never had coverage for it. So he had to borrow from some neighbors or other merchants to pay.
To repay.
To repay. And actually, the merchandise never belonged to him. It always belonged to the manufacturers or big salespeople in Warsaw. It belonged to him only when the war started, and there was no more Warsaw. We didn't know where Warsaw is anymore, because it was a upheaval. So he became all of a sudden a rich man, because he said all the merchandise in the store belonged to him now. And he went out and he bought, I remember, wood, and he's gonna extend the house and make it bigger and nicer. But it never happened, really. It was all a dream. We also bought all kind of food to store, because it became very difficult with food when the war broke out. So he stored, for a watch you could get flour, sugar, so we stored it in the house, but unfortunately we never used it.
Okay. Did anybody in your family belong to any youth groups or
Yes.
social groups? What did they belong to?
I belonged to an organization which was called Gordonia. My brother belonged to the Hashomer HaTzair.
And what was Gordonia?
Gordonia was it was a Zionist organization. It was not in between Shomer and Beitar. It was not much left and not much right, in between.
Okay. What was the population of Kletsk?
I would say around 6,000.
And what percentage of that was Jewish?
90%.
90%. So
Yeah.
it was basically
And
a Jewish
basically
city.
Jewish, yeah. Maybe 5,000 Jews, maybe more. And the rest were Tatars, a few Russians, but Belarus, because it was on the border, the Russian and Polish border, and Polacks, original Polacks, very few, just mayor, what do you call mayor? Yeah, mayor
Yeah.
town. There was one Polish doctor, I remember, and maybe a few other people in the city hall. And in the police, you could find some Polish people. That was
Okay.
it.
Were you aware of the start of the war when it began?
We didn't feel it so much, except we had a lot of refugees that ran from for the western part of Poland. It came, and lots of young people came all of a sudden, and they said every home was filled with people that stayed with us. Became very crowded. We didn't realize, we didn't see the Germans yet. And the war started on the 1st of September. On the 17th of September, the Russians, the Bolsheviks, came in. So we spoke Russian, and they promised us we don't have to worry, that they took it over and they are going to be here permanently. We didn't know what's in store for us. So my mother spoke Russian. She could speak to the Russians, but immediately they took away all from the store, all the watches and rings and everything we owed and we had, and we thought it's ours. It's all was nationalized. And they took it away, and my father had to work as an employee in it's called Artel, where watchmakers and his apprentices and were there together, and they told him to sweep the floor because he was a merchant before, and this was not kosher anymore.
So it wasn't
So
actually...
the ones that were communists, the ones who they had nothing before, became all of a sudden the leaders. And he worked in this Artel, and I remember like he was so upset bitterly that he had to clean and sweep the floor in that so-called Artel. I don't know what you call it in English.
At this point,
Artel is where you work together, a few people at the same...
it's a collective, some sort of collective.
Yeah.
But were you able to go back to school at that point?
Yes, I went back to school. To
Just
Grodno.
Just you went back, or did your brother go too?
My brother didn't go to school. My brother stayed home. My brother played an instrument, a trumpet, and he played in an orchestra or something. He left Kletsk and he went to Vilna. He came back. He didn't know what to do with himself. We stayed home for a while. I went back to school, but there was no more school, so I came back home. And soon enough, my father arranged for us that we could go, my brother and I, to Minsk, which is a big city we had to cross the border, so we went on a train, and we came to Minsk, and this is where we went to school, the two of us. I went to the conservatory, which had, it was called Muzykalno-Pedagogiczny Institute, which was music and pedagogy, to be a music teacher. Like, yeah. So I entered that school. I also had to make exams, and my brother was in the Muzykalne Uczyliście. That was like a high school with a music school, and he was in a dormitory for boys, and I was in a dorm for girls.
Okay, and this was at what time? This was in 39?
40.
In 40?
Till 41 in June. And in June started the war.
That's when it started to affect your life.
That's right. In June, the Germans started to bomb. They came to Kletsk, but we were in Minsk at that time, my brother and I. We were planning on going for the summer home for vacation, but we never made it. So we remained in Russia. We never saw our parents anymore, never. We could never come home, and we never knew what happened to our parents. My parents remained in Kletsk.
And your youngest brother?
My youngest brother, from what people tell me, the story that when the Germans came in on the first night or afternoon, they took 20 young, gorgeous boys, put them in the middle of the market. Everybody had to watch, and they were shot. And one of the 20 was my brother. So my parents had no children anymore because we were gone. My brother and I, they never knew what happened to us. And we had no way of communicating with them. There were no telephones, no telegrams, nothing that you could do. And the youngest was shot. Apparently my mother went off her mind, which I know from neighbors that survived. 7 people survived out of the whole population. And those people, some of them are dead, but the ones that survived and are in Israel, I have seen after the war, and they tell me this is how I know what happened. Beside that, there is a book that was the survivors from Kletsk. They made together something. They wrote a book, which I have the copy here, and it tells you about the details when there were mass graves and two major schrittes. How do you say schritta?
Slaughtering?
Slaughter, twice. So my parents were in one group, and the others were in the other group. One group perished in 1940 and one group in 41. They put them in the synagogue, all of them. But I also know from what people tell me that in Kletsk were a few young men that threw grenades at the very end, and it was like a suicide squad, what do you call it, and the whole city went on town went on fire, and they were killed too. A few ran away to the forest, and these are the survivors, the ones that ran away. And a few that were outside. Very few survived.
So your brother, the one that was with you in Minsk, how did you and
My brother that's in Minsk was in Russia, and he was taken to the army, and he played in the band. He played his trumpet, and that's how he survived. During the time when I was in Russia, that's a whole chapter beside that I was working in a kolkhoz. Do you know what is called collective farming? Kolkhoz. And he found me through the Blue Cross. He found me during the war. And he came one day from the army. He took off a day or two, and he came to see me. That's how I knew where he is. And I helped him to get out of Russia. He came to Poland after the war in 1946.
Okay, what happened to you when you were left in Minsk in 41? You said, straight to a kolkhoz?
No, that's a long story. No. when we went, when Minsk was bombed, it was the 22nd of June 1941. I ran out because there was no more transportation, no more streetcars, no more buses, nothing, to walk. And I walked until I found my brother. And with my brother, we went with a whole mob of people out of town. And we didn't know where we were walking, we were going. We slept in a forest one night, 2 nights, and then on the 3rd night, we got on a train. And this train was proceeding, going to Moscow. On the train were wives and families of the soldiers and of the officers of the army, and we were with them. They all spoke Russian, and they promised they would let us into Moscow and then help us organize our lives, but they never let us in because we had no passports, we had nothing to show who we are, and they were afraid probably that we were from a different origin, you know. So they told us that we cannot go to Moscow, and we had to get off the train, which was close to a city called Saratov. And I remembered that my mother had a sister in Saratov. And I said to my brother, we are going to find my mother's sister. And I remembered the address. And I found that sister. When we came and we knocked at the door, she was afraid to let us in. I think I mentioned it. She thought that we are from Poland, and she never admitted having a sister in Poland. Her husband was a communist. He was Latvian, and she was afraid to tell her husband that there are 2 children of her sister. But we finally managed to talk her into let us stay with her, and we stayed a while, a few days. They had very little food to eat in the house. They had 3 children. They were very poor people. She had no clothes to wear. She couldn't help me with anything. I knew that I have to be on my own, that I have to find something to do. My brother too. My brother was taken away from the street into the army. It wasn't really to the army. It was called Trudovой Front. It is to work, to dig ditches. What happened to him after, I didn't know, but I knew that I'm alone and I have to do something with myself. One day I was standing in line for my ration of bread, and I heard young girls speaking Polish, my language, and almost my age. I asked them who they were, and they told me they come from a small town near Pinsk, Luninets, and they were in the same position as I was. And they were working in a factory, sewing mittens for the soldiers. So they told me if I'm willing to go and work with them 12 hours a night, 1 month at night and 1 month in the day, 12 hours. And I said I would go. And I went with them.
These girls were Jewish?
Yeah, 3 Jewish girls. They became my very good friends. I moved out of my aunt's house and I lived with the girls. We slept in one bed in a room size that only the bed could fit into that room. And we were going to work for 12 hours and come back tired and go to sleep. And this lasted for a while until I became very sick. I got pleurisy. And I couldn't work anymore. So we decided we have to do something. We have to get out of there. So we went on a train without tickets. I don't know how we made it. And we found out that there is an army forming, a Polish army near Saratov, 40 kilometers. And maybe if we'll get there, they will accept us and we can work there, we can do something. Because they had for girls so-called PSK, Przysposobienie Wojskowe Kobiet, that was for girls. But we were never accepted because we were Jewish. They rejected us. But they took us on a train and they brought us all the way to Asia, to Jalalabad, which is Kyrgyzstan. And there they promised they would take us because the army from there was going to Iran. But they rejected us again because we were Jewish and we couldn't go with them. So we had to stay in the kolkhoz and work on the farm. We used to pick cotton. We used to work all kind of very hot climate. It is extremely hot. It burns your shoulders. And each of us was sick with malaria, with typhoid. We were so sick. I met my husband in 1942 or 43. He was working in the Polish embassy as a secretary. And there was a Polish embassy that used to receive UNRWA packets and clothing from CARE, C-A-R, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he could help us and gave us some clothes to wear, shoes. And I had one pair of shoes which I had all the time until the end of the war, and one towel. And eventually we got married. I got married to this man, to Leon, which was working in the embassy. The other girls stayed single. One left. One was with me till the very end. We saw each other later after the war. We met in Poland and then in Israel. One is in Brazil right now, one is in Israel, one died, and I am here. So these are the 4 girls. My brother managed to come to Poland after the war. I helped him. I sent him papers to come to Poland. He came and he stayed with my mother-in-law and my husband's sister, which was alive after the war. And he went to a kibbutz in Poland, and with the kibbutz he went to Germany. He was in DP camp in Germany.
Can you just go back a little bit? When you married your husband, you said it was in 1944. What happened between then until the end of the war to
Well,
you?
when we were married, we stayed in Russia till 1946. The war ended in 1945, but until they let us leave, it was a repatriation, you call. I got my passport, and we came to Poland in 1946. We came to Krakow to my mother-in-law. She was alive, and my sister-in-law. My family, my family perished completely. We didn't go to Kletsk ever. I never saw what happened. All I know about Kletsk is from other people that survived. The whole town burned completely. But my brother from Israel went a few years ago to Kletsk. They put a monument. The government allowed to put a monument, and we all contributed, all survivors, and there is a monument there. There's nothing left, no Jewish people, not one Jew lives there anymore. Not one.
So in 46, you were in Poland, in Krakow.
In Krakow, yes.
And how did you manage there?
We were there 3 months because there were pogroms in Poland at that time, in Kielce. If you know this famous pogrom with 36 people were killed. So we wouldn't stay there for nothing. We wanted to get out, and we decided to go. And the Brycha took us at night on a truck, and we went with the Brycha to Austria, to Vienna. We came to Vienna. There were 4 zones: American, British, French, and I don't remember what was it, Russian, I think, the 4th. We came to the American zone, but they told us that if you come into the American zone, you cannot have any documents from Russia that you were in Russia, because they won't let you in. So we burned all our documents. We don't have any documents, nothing, that we were married, that we had something. All my documents were gone. And we were in Vienna for a week or so, 10 days maybe. And from Vienna, the Brycha brought us to Salzburg. In Salzburg were camps, DP camps, and we stayed in a DP camp. In Salzburg, I gave birth to my son, which I have here now, David.
So you were in Salzburg for quite a long
4
time.
years.
4 years. And your son was born in what
In
year?
1949. My son was born. And in Salzburg, I worked already as a teacher in the camps, in a school. There were a lot of shlichim that came from Israel to organize Hebrew schools in the camps. And I was one of the first teachers because I was qualified to be a teacher. And Hebrew I knew from home, so I became a Hebrew teacher. And they gave us all kind of material and help and books, and they were teaching us songs, and they had special people that used to come to organize this and help. We had seminars, and I worked there as a teacher in the camps, and I was always singing in camps at night Hebrew songs for the displaced people that were there. So I was useful to I knew the Council of Israel, I knew all the people because I was working for them. And some people went at that time to Israel already, it was a giyus. My husband worked for the Ort, training young people who are going to Israel to have a profession. He's a mechanical engineer. So he also was, we were both working, and they didn't give us money for we didn't get a salary. We used to get only food, and they promised that when we ever get to the United States or to Canada, we will be paid here. And we got, when we came to Canada, $270.
Okay, what happened in between that and the time you came to Canada?
Well, in Salzburg, life was normal. It was not luxurious. A family lived in one room. We didn't have a house.
You were there from 1946 to 1950?
54 years, yeah. And from there, people were sitting or waiting to go somewhere. So you had to go somewhere. Either it was a choice to go to the States, to Canada, or to Israel. A lot of people went to Israel. But my brother was in Israel at that time already, and he told me, don't you dare to come with a baby to Israel. Times are very hard, and I cannot help you. If you can go to Canada, it would be better for you. I knew Leon Kronitz. Do you know who it was here in Montreal?
He was involved in the Zionist...
In education.
Yes.
He was the principal of the Salomon Schechter, was Shari Zion before, and he was also in the Zionist organization involved. And I knew him from home. He comes from Kletsk. So I was looking through the Jayas. I found him. And I asked to help me and send me some papers, a permit to come to Canada, because this is what we chose. This was our choice. And the family, his mother and his sister, the whole family worked on it, and we got papers. They gave a guarantee that they sponsor